Hi, everyone, and welcome back for some of you. So my name is Miguel Burguet. I'm a program coordinator here at Google for Startup Spain, and I'm pleased to introduce you a new talk, part of our global program, Startup School Restart. As part of this program, we are recruiting an amazing panel of mentors from Google, external experts, and startup founders from the community. Our goal is basically to offer you the tools and skills to restart your business in these challenging times. Before we start, I would like all of you to please check in through the link that you have below so that we can follow up after the session. And without further delay, let me introduce you to our special guest today, Valli Ravindran. Hi, Valli. Welcome. Valli is a designer manager at Google and has previously worked as a designer, product manager, and startup founder. So feel free to drop your questions for Valli on the chat on the right side of the screen or below if you are in your mobile phone. And thank you everyone for attending this session. And most of all, thank you very much, Valli, for your availability in this early morning for you, afternoon for us. And I'll let you present your slides. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Miguel, for having me at this session. I'm super excited to be here, to be talking to all of you. I'm very happy that I'm able to contribute during this time. We know it's really hard for everybody to be home, but thanks to the team here, they are putting together a great program, and I'm super glad to be a part of that. So today we are going to be talking about design thinking, and I'm going to be chatting about what our process at Google is and some of the projects I've been at and what sort of a framework that we follow to finish our product development. And to speak a little bit about me, Miguel definitely give a short sort of intro of who I am. So I just to give you guys my journey, I studied human-computer interaction. I started as a designer, worked at various small to big companies and at startups, became a design manager and a product manager, and then founded my own startup. And then most recently, 3 years ago, I joined Google, and I'm a design manager in the YouTube ads org. So today we are going to be focusing on two primary objectives. The goal for us is to familiarize yourself with the design thinking framework so that whenever you hear about how we apply it to our work, you can see what parts of it you can take it back to your startup and apply it to your your own team, your own sort of building your companies. So those are our two objectives: learning the principles of design thinking and talking about how we can apply this process to create solutions. So in short, what is design thinking? So the definition goes like this. Design thinking is a creative problem-solving process that focuses on a user-centered approach to create a solution that is technologically and economically feasible. So what does really technologically feasible and economically feasible mean? It changes depending on your context, right? If you're a small, scrappy startup, you'll have a set of constraints that will be different from a company like Google. The important thing to keep in mind is that using this design thinking process, it's a framework that you can obviously see what parts of it works for you and how you can change it based off the context. But you will also see in our at the end of our talk that you don't need to have a ton of resources or a huge team or a lot of sort of resources than you already have to do the same sort of framework. It works for a 3-person company to a 300-person company. It can be adapted to what your problem that you're trying to solve and what kind of a company you are. So to start with, we are going to see what this methodology is all about. You can see that there are 5 steps to that. And to even like sort of, before even like we go into the 5 steps, I want to say like, this process or this framework was originally codified by Stanford, the university, and the innovation company IDEO. So they had different variations of how they did this, and it has been successfully used for many, many years now to create small projects or even big ones. So the phases go like this, and I'll get into it more detail as our presentation goes. But in short, first step is empathize, which is where we would be observing, engaging, and immersing with our users. The second step is define. This is when we are expressing the problem in the form of the user's point of view. Ideate. This is transitioning from identifying the problems in the previous step to finding solutions. The fourth step is prototype, which is getting all of our ideas out of our head and into the real world. And the final step is testing, which is the next iteration of the prototype. We have something that is at a fidelity where we can show it to our users and get their feedback. So that's, in a nutshell, the whole process. And we apply this process on all projects, whether it be like traditional web-based products that Google is known for, or new initiatives or deeply integrated systems that we launch as holistic experiences. You can think of like Android as that, like where it is a complete system that has to work across various like apps and programs, and so it's a holistic experience. We also use it to pivot our focus of product areas. So you guys might be familiar with this, the Google Glass. Did you know that when the Google Glass was initially out in the market, it was advertised as like a consumer product, like something that would be worn by like users who are like commuting, can see the directions, and so you can see it that the initial positioning of the product was, this is a cool gadget to add to your everyday life. Google Glass is for everyone. And then, slowly, like after it was launched, we started to see some bit of like, issues with the Google Glass being marketed for everyone. It was not really the, solving for the use cases that our users have. So applying this process and, going back to the table and figuring out, what is the use case for Google Glass, we were able to pivot from a consumer product to an enterprise product. Now, Google Glass is a useful gadget. It is used in manufacturing or in any sort of like in enterprise use case where precision is needed. It sort of is like an assistive device now. So that's, so if we think about it, to make that pivot happen, you need to really understand what the problem that our users were having and how we can immerse ourselves to understand where our products can be useful. If we initially took the reaction from the market, and if we called it, okay, Google Glass was a failure, so let's just like scrap the whole thing, it's a missed opportunity, because we were able to find out the deep end problem of why it was not working, and then we're able to pivot it to something that is actually very much around in the market and is very much useful. So hopefully this is obviously a high level example, but hopefully like by the end of this class you would start to also see that product market fit is also a design problem. And this is what this framework can actually help you solve. So design thinking is not really meant to be like a bunch of designers sitting in a room talking to one another. Even though the title says design thinking, it is actually for your whole team. Like, everybody has to be thinking about your user and how you can identify what are the issues with your product, and to find out how you can penetrate the market. So even though it's called design thinking, it is not for designers. It's like a facilitating process that makes sure that your product is built thoughtfully and it's inclusive. So let's get into our 5 steps. First one we're going to talk about is empathize. So what does empathize really mean? There is like a very popular saying that it came out of Google. Focus on the user and all else will follow. What does that mean? Like, there really no, like our ex-CEO, Larry Page said, there's no substitute for personally watching and listening to real people. You're focusing on your user and everything else will follow, which means you would understand where you're going wrong and you would understand where to, do more research or to pivot or to improve or even to know that some things in your product are really gold and you have to keep it. You would only know that if you are immersed with your users. So when we say users, what do we really mean? Well, the user in design thinking would be the person or the population for which you're hoping to build a solution. To empathize with your user, okay, we know that Susanna is a mom of a toddler, Sarah is another mom of a toddler, and Nicole is a mom of a toddler. Okay, so we have few moms of toddlers. Then let's go slightly wider in our population. Oh, we have Sonali, who is an empty nester mom, which only means like they have older kids and they've moved out of their house, so that's why they're called an empty nester moms. And then let's go in a little more deeper. Oh, so then we know Sushma is a mom of a toddler, plus she's a mom in Madrid. And Jessica is a mom in Madrid. So now we are putting in more qualifiers. Like now we are saying, okay, let's put geo. Is your product going to focus on moms in your own locality? Or is it going to be for all of Europe or just Eastern Europe? Or is it going to be for the world? Like you need to understand where you're drawing the circle and saying like, this is my user boundary. I would be looking at the core users, let's say like moms of toddlers in Madrid is my first preference. And then I would expand it to moms of toddlers in Barcelona. So you are drawing this circle and saying like, whatever I'm building, I would be, most probably reaching to these people first. And then if I'm successful, then I would expand. And then I would expand more. But you wouldn't start by saying, my product is for moms of toddlers in the world. I'm going to reach everybody in every nook and corner. You could, but for most probably for a startup, it's going to be really hard to reach that kind of audience. So it's best to start small and then keep expanding. So that's kind of like how we are positioning. And I think I just explained this whole slide as well. So we are trying to find out what sort of is the pattern in your population and where's the overlap. And it's now, if you think about it, you have a much better idea of your population now. Now you're saying, okay, I'm going to directly talk to, like Jessica, who lives in Madrid. And I know the kind of like day she has on any particular given day, versus thinking that, okay, I'm going to reach out to a mom in another country or like in a different, like they speak a different language. You have to do way more research to understand their psyche. Like what does their day look like? What are their difficulties? Like you would have, the research of that user is going to be way harder and way sort of like, removed from you, versus thinking that, okay, I understand this population better. So to empathize, the first step is trying to understand your population, trying to understand what types of environments they live in, who do they interact with, what kind of technology they have access to, what motivates them. So you're trying to understand all of their traits. If you would be going much, much deeper about your user in terms of, what are their everyday patterns and what sort of like, what neighborhoods would they be living? How, are they educated, or am I like reaching out to people who are like, they have different sets of, qualifications. So you're taking everything into consideration. And then you're going to ask yourself, how is my product going to help these users. And you're also going to ask yourselves, am I going to focus really on one set of population, which is like, let's say, moms of toddlers? Or am I going to target the overlapping areas where my product can say, okay, for moms of toddlers, my product can help this way. But for empty nester moms, my product can still also help them because my product is for all moms. So you will start to actually understand how you're going to position for each sets of your population. And also, like, as you're going into figuring out what features you would have for your products, if you know the kinds of populations you're going to be targeting, you can also have more measurable impact if you focus on a specific audience and then say, like, okay, these are the sets of features I have for this group, and how successful am I? Like, you're able to put in sort of and a KPI or a goal and say, am I reaching this cohort much faster than the others, or is it sort of going at the same stage? So now you're able to distinguish between your own population and see where your product is being more successful. So those are the benefits of actually getting into this stage where you're empathizing with your user and trying to put together this overlapping target segment. And then the next thing is, like, obviously, to get to understand all of this, you need to be engaging with your users. So, if you already have an existing user base, you definitely can, should be doing more activities to get their feedback. And, whether it's like talking to them or sort of like, doing some sort of surveys or watching their behavior, there are so many different ways. Again, we'll talk about this in step 5. But, at every stage, you're going to be doing that with your users. So now is going to be our first exercise. Hopefully all of you brought a pen and a paper or like a notebook or something. So we are going to try and do this like quick exercise just so that we are driving the point much harder in all of our heads. So the first task is about how you can really put yourselves in the shoes of your selected user base. All of you might already be involved in a startup or have a company. So why don't you use this as a chance to think of your target product population? So it could, whoever you're building the product for, right? Like we spoke about, like moms of toddlers. That is like, if at all I had a product, and if that, hypothetically they were the user base, I would be thinking about them right now. But whatever your company is, think about who you're building that for, and write down the top 3 challenges they face every day. And you don't have to think of the challenges based off of the product you're building. Just think of the challenges that they generally have, and write that down in a piece of paper. So, just start to think about what they consider starting from their morning until evening and walk through their day to identify the challenges. So let's take about 5 minutes, and then when the time's up, I would like at least 2 of you to maybe chat, put it in the chat about what the top 3 challenges that are for your population. Sound good? All right. So I'll ask you guys to come back in 5 minutes and to share out. Great. I guess, like, looking at your answers, you guys, like, have shown that you understand or are engaging with your users to understand what the issues they are facing. I see some, good answers here saying, like, there are some real issues in terms of their, efficiency at work. They're having, either whether it is to do with the tools that they have, or sort of like, efficient way of using existing tools. There is also like, a new one I just saw, like a construction developer. They are, okay, so it's more around like, document management is their like biggest challenge. Great. So, and then like, there's another one that's coming in that says like, the lack of time or bureaucracy, difficulty to allocate budget. These are the higher level challenges. So, and I'm seeing a positive sort of result here where you're not exactly talking about what your product does. Instead, you're talking about your user as somebody who wants to get their job done, but they are having some difficulty to finish their job, and these are their challenges. And that's the right way to think about your users. They are not really waiting for a new startup to come and like help them. Instead, they just have challenges that they find workarounds to accomplish every day so that they can get their job done and then move on. So yeah, good stuff there. So let's move on to the second step, which is define. So now that you guys understand the problem in the form of the point of view of our user, our next step is to define that problem in, at a whole. So we have empathized with our users. We want to operationalize the problems they have. And to do that, we want to be concise and write down a problem statement. So that sort of talks about who our user is, what do they want, why do they want it, so put it together in sort of like a statement. So that should be resonating at every stage in your product development stages. Like everybody in your team should know what sort of problem statement we have in front before we are trying to find solutions. So, you're analyzing your observations and then you're synthesizing them to define the core problems you identified as problem statement. So let's look at some examples, right? So let's say hypothetically Google is working on an app to help people keep track of what they're eating. So here's a problem statement about Mark, a potential user of this app. Mark needs to learn about nutrition so he can better keep track of what he's eating. Seems reasonable, but it's missing something. Does it reflect if we truly know what the user's problems are? Does it reflect any specific issue? No, it doesn't. It's too broad. So where's the actual problem? Who is this Mark really? Like, this is not a problem statement, but if this isn't a problem statement, what is, right? So let's look at a framework. So one way to define a problem statement is to use a framework like this. So let's look at it again. Blank, who's our user, is a blank. You fill in with all the characteristics of that user. Who needs, specify what his need is, because, put down your insight here, because you understood through data why they would need that. So let's look at it again for the same example. So here for Mark now, here's a more empathetic way to define their problem statement by considering their point of view. Mark is a nurse working night shifts who needs to integrate healthy eating habits into his daily life because he doesn't want to feel like he's on a diet. Obviously, this example feels like it's very catered to just this one person. Actually, it's not. So when we say Mark is a persona in our product. So Mark represents a population, right? So it is not, we are not going to be writing the statement for every user. Instead, we are finding the Marks of the world or the Marks of your core population and saying like, my product is going to specifically help this population. And you might have, 2 or 3 different flavors of population. So you might have like, okay, going back to our mom's example, your product might be, for, let's say like moms of ages from, birth to 13. I'm just like throwing a example here. So you could say like, okay, Susanna is a mom of a toddler. So again, we are already now saying like, okay, 0 to 3. And then you can talk about Susannas of the world who are representing mom of a toddler. And then we can pick another name. Sonali is a mom of school age children. Now we are talking about like from kindergarten to like, let's say like fourth grade. So that's how you talk about. So when we say Mark or Susanna or Joanne, we are talking about a wider population that fits into the characteristics of the target users that we are trying to speak to or trying to build for. Let's look at another example. This is actually from our colleagues who are working to optimize our YouTube app for global audiences. So think outside of the traditional Western markets. Amina is a student on the outskirts of Jakarta who needs to download her tutorial videos for school because she has a 2-hour commute with little to no data connectivity. So we are talking about a population that that probably owns phones and probably are not in the Western market, so they have very little connection or good connection while they are commuting from an outskirts to go to like college or go to work. So we are now like trying to make YouTube much better for this population. So that's kind of like how you distill it down in a problem statement. Now you're able to think about this user and you're able to, as I was saying, maybe you're able to even visualize the Aminas of, the population who live in Jakarta, who are probably like commuting in a train or a bus. And you're thinking about that person a little more deeply than you would when you just say like, oh, we need an app for people who just need like faster connection or like no connection. It just like puts the person in front for you. So you're now like, have a different visual in front of you when you are thinking that this is, how would this actually work? And even if you want to engage with your users, you're now going to look for these aminas rather than starting from scratch. So this is going to be our second task, and actually this is the last task as well. So let's try this. Let's take 5 minutes again to write down the user's problem statement. Your users, like you guys in the last exercise, try to write try to come up with the challenges that your users have. Now think about those challenges a little more deeply and write this problem statement. So you're going to be defining the problem in a very human-centered way. You can put in like a user characteristic, talk about their need, and also talk about their insight. And after 5 minutes, we are going to do the same thing where whoever is ready can share it out in our chat. And time starts now, and I'll ping you guys back in 5 minutes. So yeah, so you have the framework here. So try to fill in those blanks. And try to sort of share that at the end of 5 minutes. All right, let's continue. Thanks for adding your comments here. And again, like you're starting to get it. Like keep practicing this as you're coming up with like new insights that you find out about your population. Try to actually write the problem statement in a way that it makes it easy for you to empathize with the users. To share out a couple that I see in the live chat, we can see that Tom this is from Aram. Tom is a software developer who needs help with his visa appointments and house searching because he's going to relocate to Amsterdam soon. So this is more about like somebody who's relocating to a different country or like city, and they need help with like finding and making sure everything is in place. So yeah, so you guys are getting it. Again, like keep this framework and continue to work on this. We'll move on to the next phase in our framework, which is ideate. So ideate is all about identifying the problems and finding solutions. So now getting back to our major principles, we've established our chosen user, analyzed and synthesized their observations to define the problem. Now it's time to discuss my personal favorite stage, which is ideation. This is a phase where we think about all the possible solutions that come to mind. Like you're brainstorming the problem and coming up with like lots of solutions for the problem. So you have your problem statement in front of you and you're trying to like come up with as many as solutions as you can. For example, here is a popular ideation activity that we use at Google in Google Design Sprints. We take a simple sheet of paper and we divide it into 8 different like equal parts in the paper, like by folding. And for each of the section, we actually either write down an idea or draw an idea or come up with like something small that is going to be unique about your product and that is going to solve our users' need. And these are like real examples of how the crazy 8s, or sometimes it's crazy 4s, actually works. Like, sometimes it's very visual like this, where it's like a drawing. It shows like, okay, if I click on this, this is going to happen. It's going to show me a graph. This is going to react in a way like, there is ML in it. So it's going to understand who you are. So each one is like one specific idea. Or sometimes it is also like we write down the idea. Like my idea is to, let's say, like, come up with like a word cloud of all the things that they can do. Or, this is going to have like, you instead of drawing, because not everybody is a designer in a company. So not everybody is comfortable drawing. But if you have a great idea, you can put it down in words, because at this point, it's much better to collect all the ideas from your head to paper and then think about it later of how to go about that idea. So this is something that you guys can do after this talk. Like, think about it as homework. You are going to take a piece of paper, either do like 8 folds or 4 folds, and write down the ideas that you have based off of the problem statement that you've written. Just again, like, keep in mind that no idea is too crazy. Write down every solution that comes to mind, because again, you don't want to restrict yourself during the brainstorming stage. So we'll talk about the next stage in our framework, which is prototyping. So now you have many different ideas. You're going to, as a team, you're going to look at all the ideas that were collected, and you probably might have favorites, feasibility, again, other sort of like technical limitations, and then pick maybe like a few. And then you're going to start to prototype these. You're either going to like draw it out or craft whatever is possible, keeping in mind your minimum viable product. So let's talk about what is a minimum viable product, right? So the idea is that the product or the app or the website or whatever you decide to build is developed with sufficient features to satisfy early adopters. Because that's an MVP, because you're putting the MVP out to understand traction, to understand the product market fit. So you need from every iteration for a solution to be workable. The final complete set of features is only designed and developed after considering feedback from the first users that test what you've created. So let's say your goal was to create a vehicle that could take you places. So in this example, again, like, and it's hypothetical, there isn't much you can do with just a wheel or 2 wheels, or 2 wheels with an axle, or the body of a car without a wheel or engine. So you're going at it, building parts by parts without actually testing anything. So let's look at this example. There are certain times when someone might want to go to market with a completely realized car. This is expensive and risky. If you're in this scenario, never be afraid to swallow your pride and focus your product based on user feedback. You may have gone to market with a car, but perhaps all you needed was a skateboard. Because, again, like, you're putting a lot of time and effort to think that, something as fully developed and blown as a car is what your audience needed, when all they needed was to go from one place to another using a skateboard. So here is a better idea of what iterating with MVPs look like. We see that even with just a simple skateboard, you're able to achieve your goal of taking you places. The fancier transition and additions, all based on what you learn from interacting with users at every stage, could lead you to a car. I'm going to skip this example because I think we are running short of time and I want to keep enough time for your questions. So this is another way of how prototypes are done. Like again, it can start from paper and it can go to a hi-fi prototype as you see in this slide. And at Google, in every team, there are different variations of how we do it. It's like, paper starts out rough, but it definitely helps you in visualizing what the UI would look like. The level of fidelity should be aligned with the audience you'll be testing with. For example, if you don't think your users will be able to understand a paper prototype as a concept, even after you explain to them in detail, then you might want to show them in a phone where they are more sort of comfortable thinking that this is a product and they can give you valid feedback. The hi-fi prototype in the right is a prototype from one of my colleagues, and they wanted to cafe test this prototype. What cafe test really means, like, just walking into a cafe. In our case, it would be a Google cafe, so it's not outsiders. But in the startups that I've worked at, I would actually go into a Starbucks and start showing my prototype, and you wouldn't believe it. There would be so many people who are interested to give you feedback, even if you're not even if you're not really like incentivizing them with like money or like gift card. They are just there to help you, and they understand that startups need to get feedback, and they are more than excited to do that for you. So the term for that is cafe study, which is very casual but getting feedback. So that's a good segue into our last phase, which is testing. So you have your prototype you're satisfied with, and it's time to test things out. So now in this phase, this is a final stage of the design thinking framework. And yet this is also an iterative one, like where you do one test, and then you get more feedback, and you go back with more changes and do another test. So it's not just like one and done. You can make this iterative as well. So you refine and alter as you get feedback, and go back to your own users. Either it could be the same users or different users, but you are testing enough number of times to understand and improve. Like when you make improvements, you want to make sure that the improvements you made is not derailing your product again. Instead, it's taking you forward. Here are some methodologies that are out there. You definitely should actually look into, like, what kind of methodologies you want to use. For a startup, it's the easiest would be the usability studies, and it's very common, where you have a set of designs and you have a goal in terms of like what you want to get out of this test, and then you come up with like some questions and you show the product and have them use the product. You're never going to ask your users, what do you need? Instead, you're going to observe them and see what they are doing. Usability study is really good for quick feedback on your early iterations. And then the other one I spoke about is the cafe studies, where you can quickly reach out to your intended audience. Like, if you're working with an audience that are going to be congregated in a space, let's say like, I was in Singapore, and one of the companies were doing a product for meal delivery for people who are working in like busy business districts. So they would go into food malls and find people who are at lunch and spend 10 minutes with them to ask them questions or show them how they would do it, because that's their target audience. They don't want the employees to come out of their offices. Instead, they want the meals to be given to them in their office. So that was their product. So you understand where they would be, and then go there to do your cafe study. Okay, so and then like, here is some of the other ways that you can also test. There is like qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative actually means that you need a larger sample, like you would do a survey with like hundreds of people. That is a quantitative method. Qualitative is like, trying to identify 6 to 7 people and showing them your product and see how they behave. Are they able to complete their task? Are they able to find the things in your app? So that is more like qualitative feedback. Okay. And then we also often talk about like, what's the user's mental model? So this is something very important as you're considering your product. A mental model is users understanding of how the system would work based off of their prior experiences, which sometimes can be wrong, but most of the times that's what you're building against, right? So for example, here is a Nest thermostat. It is a dial. When it's a dial, the user's mental model is to turn right to increase it. If your product works where it actually does the reverse, then you're fighting against the user's mental model, because they have seen like a volume control, or like so many in so many places you see a circular dial, and you, to increase it, you just move it clockwise. So that is kind of the mental model. So in contrast, your conceptual model represents how your system actually works. So let's say you have a limitation and you're not able to do it the way the users are expecting the system to work, then that is a clash, and that is going to bring about usability issues. Obviously, this dial is a very simple example, and it would be like a no-brainer. Like, of course, we are going to make the dial move clockwise to increase the temperature. But in lots of other scenarios, it might be a little more vague, or it might be a little more like there's a lot of like gray area in trying to understand what is the user expecting to do based off of something that they've already seen, versus how can we train them. That's where your testing comes into place. So you understand, what they're expecting out of your product, even before they know what your product is about. So that's kind of like, the end of our slides in terms of how you can test. And that concludes our like 5 phases of design thinking. But here is like, one additional resource that Google has free for you. So obviously, like, we've crammed a lot of subject in this 1-hour talk. But if you want to test it yourself and plan for something like this with your own company, please take this down, which is designssprintkit.withgoogle.com. And this has like lots of examples, lots of ideas of how to do this in your own company. And it goes through the same, the different stages of this framework, and it helps you brainstorm solutions, it helps you understand your user, and it gives you practical ways to test your product with your users, so you can iterate and you can be more confident about the product you're building. So that's kind of it. And it looks like we have like a couple more minutes, so I'm happy to answer any of your questions, and really thank you for being diligent and following along. And I know it's not easy to do a remote talk, so I'm happy all of you guys are like engaged and are commenting here.
Thank you very much, Valli. Very hands-on and insightful session with a lot of people being part of it with your complex exercises. So we have 5 minutes, so let's try to answer all the questions. The first one is from Anton Astre, which was actually one of the first speakers of the program, so happy to see you here. How do you approach design thinking while working remotely? Which best practices/tools can you use when you are not in the same room? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. I know this is becoming our new reality. And honestly, like one of the things that even when we are together, something that we try and do is to have more collaborative environments that your team members can work in. I think it's kind of becoming common practice to, let's say, like, you're coming up with plans for your company, or any sort of like, strategic, product requirement documents, or like design solutions or eng docs. To have it in like a collaborative, like a Google Docs is something obviously we use. It makes sure that the team is in sort of the same understanding of the product. So think about more in ways of like, how can you be more extra transparent right now, because everybody's vacuuming. I mean, everybody's sort of like, working in a vacuum, and you might not really be sure how much you're able to convey to each other. So number one, like, have more collaboration built in your regular, workflows. And two, like, I understand, like, it's not as easy as just like going up on a whiteboard and start sketching and having these like difficult discussions of like, which one should we pick, which one we shouldn't. but there are tools out there. Like, we started even to join, like, so for example, in the design thinking process, there is the ideation phase where you do like crazy eights, right? So crazy eights can be ideas in a spreadsheet, and you can start to sort of like vote again, like, across your team, saying, I want to, these are the top challenges of our users, and these are the solutions I've come up with. And as a team, can we all vote, and can we all, like, find ideas and work out of the spreadsheet to see where all of our minds are at and how we can prioritize. That is one way of actually collecting ideas and making sure everybody is agreeing with you, but more like objectively, by putting, like, let's say you can start to, I'll give you an example. Each person can put in 3 top ideas in a spreadsheet, and each person has 3 votes to give for these ideas. And then you start to sort of like do a prioritization exercise amongst your team, but very like virtually. So that's 2, right? Like number 3 is, how can I build and then test? So once you're building your like solutions, there are like products out there called usertesting.com or Validately. I can add it in our chat. I think I can only add it to the private, and then
you can also add to the other one, but we can also add it afterwards. The video will be online, so no worries about it.
Yeah, so there are products that even at a company of our scale uses sometimes, especially during this time, because it's not easy to go meet our users right now. Nobody is comfortable doing that. So we've been using Validately, which is an third-party product, and also usertesting.com, where we have our designs, we upload them, and then engage with our users. Another simple way to do is to have a screen share, have one-on-one, and show your products directly to your user, and start to see, you give them a task like, can you create an account? That's a simple example, but you see where they are clicking, what they are doing, and then you're able to understand how they are finding things in your app without asking them too many questions. So I hope I've answered. Those are the 3 steps how you can do it.
I believe so. We have another question from Elena Lopez. How do you engage with your users if you offer services for the public authorities? That's a tough one.
Okay. So yeah, no, I mean, I would say even in the team I work at, for us, it's like, we are working with like large sort of advertisers and enterprise users, which they're not, they're the number of users in our product are actually in like 20,000, 30,000, but they are like high impact users, and they are not really easy to go talk to. But definitely, I would say, like, because of the users they are, we understand they are tough, but maybe creating some sort of like a trusted tester group, or some sort of like a beta group, where you give them some incentives to be a trusted tester. So let's say, like, you somehow like recruit these users, saying like, either they get early access to new features, or they get a break in the fees, because they are going to be giving you more feedback. So you work in some incentives, and you create some sort of like a 10% or a 20% group, and they get to access your first like beta designs, and then they give you feedback. So that's kind of one way to do it. And definitely, even if they are like public authorities, a lot of them also prefer being in some sort of like a if there's like fees are waived, or they have like some personal gain, they we have seen success doing that way.
Okay, cool. I think that we reached our time limit, even though we have more questions here. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining the session. And most of all, thank you very much, Valli, for being with us in such early morning for you. You generated a lot of interest from people, I'm assuming, all over the world. And it was a very insightful session, as I mentioned before. So thank you very much for joining. And also, just let you know that tomorrow at 10 a.m. Spanish time, we will have our next session focused on omnichannel and measurement, and it will be held in Spanish. So you are all invited to join as well. Have a nice afternoon and good morning for you. Good day for you, Valli. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, guys. You've been such a great audience, and I've loved being a part of this. This is my first sort of live chat, taking questions this way, and it went so smooth. So thank you to the host and Miguel and Danielle and everybody. If you definitely I'm happy to do this more times, and I'm happy to engage with you guys. And thank you so much for including me here.
Sure, it was a pleasure. Thank you.